for another build of the day. Today we are back in our Prep Bay 1, where you guys are able to come in and actually prep your own rentals. Today we are prepping a really fun build that actually until today I had never done before. This is actually a build for an in-house production that we're doing that I can't disclose too many details about, but we are shooting BTS of everything, photo and video, and there'll be a whole big write-up coming up after we're done with it all, so you guys can see our process along the way. One of our processes were figuring out this build. The shoot calls for a very specific shot, which is a low angle, just a few inches off the ground, that's going to travel in a straight line, and I need it to be extremely consistent and repeatable. There were a few different ways to develop this build, but this is ultimately what I landed on, and I think it highlights a lot of really cool things that you can do as a filmmaker to make your lives easier, which is take a lot of different pieces of gear and combine them to create a rig like this. Once you've gotten very familiar with a variety of different pieces of gear and you understand how they work, you can start utilizing those in conjunction with one another to create the shots that you need. I've made a bunch of really crazy rigs over the years for renters and in-house stuff and things like that, and I think this is just the newest evolution of that. To ultimately create the shot, what I landed on was our doorway dolly here. It's going to be the base of our build, and we're going to build our entire setup off of it. I have a hi-hat, and from that hi-hat we are going to run a jib. The jib is then going to arm our camera off back this way, underslung, so that we can drop it as low as we can to the ground, and it's going to be far out in front of our wheelbase. I chose the doorway dolly because in addition to the consistency and the straight nature of our shot, it's also got to fit in a very fine area. It actually has to fit within 39 inches. The wheelbase of the doorway dolly is actually 30 inches, so it serves that purpose really, really well. And it is able to move very freeform. So one of the things you'll notice is the front axle here can turn just like the front end of a car, so I can actually do some really cool dolly movements, and I can fit it through tight spaces where you wouldn't be able to typically fit a dolly. Now for our purposes, the turning wheel is actually a detriment because it's going to make making a consistent straight movement very difficult. So our first challenge is to lock our front axle so that the dolly can't turn left or right. For that, I've created a setup using two different Mayfer clamps. So to get started, let's go ahead and strip off this push-pull handle here. We're not going to use it, so we're just going to loosen the thumb knob and pull out the lock pin here, and we will set this off to the side as we're not going to be using it. Then one thing, just a useful note, helpful tip with this guy, always tighten your thumb knobs back in. I've had a bunch of these get bent because people don't tighten them back in, and then they get snagged on something and the thumb knob gets bent, and then it can't be used anymore. So always tighten them all the way in so you don't accidentally damage something. And then I'm going to put our lock pin back through, and I'm just going to put it up as snug as it can to the top. Now, I'm going to lift up our dolly and put it up on some apple boxes so that I can work on it without bending over as far and can have access to the underside. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to set our front up on the first level, and then we'll throw up our back. Great. So let's grab our two Mayfer clamps. Now we do want to minimize these clamps as much as we can because we don't want a bunch of excess bits of metal or thumb knob sticking out where it's going to get in the way. So the first thing we want to do is pull off this baby spud. And I'll just set it up there for now, and we'll do the same with our other Mayfer. And then, like I had just said, we're going to tighten our thumb knob all the way back in so we don't accidentally bend that or damage it in any way. And then what we're looking to do is fit these in on this center axle here, right on either side of our center pole. Because as our wheels turn, this center post here turns as well. And I didn't find an easy method for locking the corners of our wheel in place. So instead, I'm going to lock our center here so that it can't turn, and in turn, our wheels won't be able to turn. So I'm going to take our first Mayfer here, and I'm just going to fit it in right next to it. And my aim is to get as close to the side of it, locking my wheels in that straight pattern. Now I think we are probably going to have to scoot our apple box back just a little bit. It is slightly in our way there. There we go. And we can come in underneath. Do this other side first. Great, so he's locked up flush to the side, and so you'll notice now it can turn, well actually it's not turning anyway with just the one, but it has a little slight bit of movement, so we'll take our second Mayfer and lock it in on the other side to prevent that side from moving. And with that, we are nicely locked in place. I'm making sure both my thumb knobs are pointed up. I don't want the corners of my thumb knobs to scrape on the ground as we're moving. But you'll notice now my wheels are locked in place and they're not moving at all, which is exactly what we want so that we can run this straight forward and back. Now comes to the second part of the build, which is attaching the hi-hat. And we're looking for something about right there so that our jib can sit with a good center of balance right in the middle of our dolly, because I don't want to have our weight too far on one side and have something potentially tip or something like that. So I'm going to use this hook here right in the middle, and I'm purposely going to run my hi-hat up just to the edge of it there. And then to attach it, I have a series of 2 ratchet straps. The first one does not have a hook, and it's actually just a wrap-around ratchet strap. And I wanted that on purpose because this one's goal is just to hold it down and in place to this eye bolt here. So I'm going to go ahead and unfurl this. And I'll set our ratchet end over here. And I'm just going to purposely run this strap over the hi-hat and run it through the eye bolt here in the center, around the other side. Whoa, we're not going to tie a knot around it. Yeah. There we go. And then I always like to straighten out my strap so it's just nice and flat. Just gives you a little bit more security there so the strap's not rotating on itself. We'll run that underneath. And through our ratchet there. I'm then going to pull it mostly tight because we don't want all of this excess to get coiled around the ratchet there. It's just going to run out of space. And then we'll start securing it down. There we go. You see that it slides a little bit, but it doesn't really lift up. So it serves our purposes for this strap, and we'll have a secondary strap that's finally going to lock it down onto the dolly and keep it from sliding left to right. So now we just have a bunch of excess strap here, and we need to cable it a little bit. One thing I like to always do is just do a single wrap around where I tie. It's not really a knot, but it's just a single tie around the ratchet itself, which is going to help keep it from coming loose. If someone were to accidentally bump it at all, the ratchet's not going to swing up and then become a hazard for someone to trip over or something like that. And then I'm just going to do a light coil of our strap. And tuck it underneath. I do think, let's do, there we go, a little bit tighter there. And then we have our second strap. This one does feature a hook. And so you'll have a hook and a loop on our ratchet end, and then our strap also has a hook at the end of it. What I want to do is take our hook end, and I'm going to hook it into our center eye hook here and run it underneath there. And then this, I'm just going to loop around the front end of our hi-hat. I'm going to let it hang out on the front there. And this is going to act as a center channel to basically do a plus sign to tie down our hi-hat. So I'm going to take our excess strap here, and I'm just going to feed it through underneath. There's actually enough space here that you can run it straight in between the vertical collar here and the platform. So I'm going to just straighten out my strap so we don't have a bunch of coils in it, and then I'll tuck it underneath. And this is where the Apple boxes come in really handy. Otherwise, you have to try and be lifting this as you're rigging it, and it's a bit of a pain. And just find the Apple boxes to be a big help lifting it up as you're rigging. And same deal over here. We're just going to run it underneath and pull it tight, making sure that we have it nice and straight the whole way. Looks like we have a little bit of a turn in our strap, so I'm just going to work that out. Make sure it's straight the whole way. And then same deal, I'm just going to run our strap through, pull through the excess, and tighten it down. I'm just squaring up our hi-hat as I tighten it down so that when it locks in place, it's nice and centered on our dolly there. Great, and then same thing like I did before, I'm just going to do one pass underneath as a tie to keep the ratchet handle from coming loose, and coil the excess. And I do just want to stress that I diagrammed this build out a bunch of different ways before we actually started test building, and I really took into consideration weight distribution and things like that. It's something important to keep in mind anytime you're mixing pieces of gear. Make sure you're keeping safety in mind. You don't want to get the shot, but put someone in excess risk, whether it be your talent, your camera crew, etc. So it's important just to make sure everything is safe, weighed down. Use sandbags if you need to, ratchet straps, whatever you need to make sure everything's nice, secure, and safe. With this though, our hi-hat's not moving at all. I could actually lift up the entire dolly with the hi-hat on its own, so I know that this is nice and safe and secure. So I'm going to go ahead and remove our apple boxes. We'll drop it down onto the ground and we can start rigging out the rest of our jib on top. Now that I've got it back on the ground, I'll just show you guys real quick the front to back movement with the wheels not moving. So I can grab onto our push-pull handle here and just move straight front to back, and I'm not turning in either way. That's that consistency that we were talking about, so that I'm going to be able to repeat this shot numerous times, get a few takes of it, and make sure we capture everything we need to day of. Now I am going to go ahead and turn our doorway dolly here, because I'm going to build up so that I can then show you guys this in action. The next part of our build is using the Kessler Pocket Jib, which is this guy here. We've done a video about this before, building it up as a top-down setup. So if you guys are looking for a more traditional jib build, check that out and we'll show you how to rig it on the K-pod and all of that. I didn't want to use the K-pod for this because the higher you put your weight, the more likely you are to have your setup tip or something like that. And we needed a really nice low angle, so this helps keep our center of gravity low and stable. Now, the claw ball knob for tightening this down did pose a bit of a problem for us, as it's very long and not going to fit properly with our hi-hat. So I did have to get a little bit creative with that, and I came up with this right here. I'll hold it up so we can get a nice close-up of that. It's 2 washers to act as our tie-down point, so it's going to fill the gaps. And this is a 3/8 thread with just a few washers on the back end for me to use to tighten it down and to keep it from threading straight through our washers there. And with that, we're going to tie it down to our hi-hat. So let's go ahead and get that mounted on and secured onto our dolly. It's important also to make sure you take this opportunity to level the jib on the hi-hat. Once you start building out, adding weight to it, it's going to be much more difficult to level that out. So we'll want to do that now while it's still lightweight and compact. So I'm just going to level this out. And then since I don't have a thumb knob or a hand grip to actually grip onto, I'm just going to tighten everything down with our wrench here to make sure that it stays nice and secure. Great. Now we need to start building out our jib. And for this part, it's more or less a pretty typical jib build. I'm going to add weights to the back, and then I'm going to extend out our jib and attach our camera to it. Now, in our other video, I did talk about building your camera up first and then attaching your weights so that you can set your weight properly. And that's a very good way to build a traditional jib build. But for this, if we underslung our camera, all the weight is going to be resting on our camera underneath, and we don't want that. So I'm going to start with my weight on the back. I already test built this, so I know how much weight I need, so it's not as much of a guesswork for me now, which I think is just a testament to the importance of test building your rigs, so that when you go to do it for the actual shoot, you know everything's going to fit together right, you know how much weight you need, and so on. So let's go ahead and get those attached. One of the things you will notice compared to our last build with the jib is I'm using a lot more weight. And that's just because of physics. The fulcrum of our jib is much different because I've shortened our back piece here. We don't have enough room to stretch it out as far as we need to because it would run into this arm here. So we're going to need a lot more weight because the distance is much shorter, and we're going to extend this out and put weight at the end. So you'll notice that I just have a lot more weight running on this than I typically do. I like to loosen my jib here, and I'm just going to let it rest like so. As I add weight, it's going to pull down, and we'll just do the reverse and let it rest nice on this side here. I also always like to make sure that my biggest weights are on the inside, just so that they are sandwiched in and aren't going to be moving around or anything like that, which is just a very important, helpful tool as you're rigging the weights on. We'll let that just kind of gently set itself down. And we'll run our weights over here. We aren't done though. As I mentioned, we need a lot of weight here. So we have some little tiny guys that we're going to tack onto the end to give us that last little bit that we need. And we'll use our weight clips to tie those down. That's all the weight side that we need. Now let's extend this out and we can get our camera rigged onto the end. That's just with 3 thumb knobs, so I'm going to loosen the 2 on this side, and you'll notice this one here's the other one, so we'll loosen that. And that allows you to slide the actual jib along this channel and set the length of the arm that you would like. In this instance, I want as much boom out as we can get, so I'm going to run this out as long as I am capable of doing to give us as much of that armature as we can get. Make sure all of those are nice and secured. And then this is a bowl adapter for the end of the jib. It typically would look like this, with a bowl facing up so that you're able to fit a hi-hat into it and mount it to your end like so. But what we've done is take these 3 Allen screws and actually flip it around so it mounts upside down. That's going to allow us to undersling our tripod head and mount our camera underneath, allowing it to get much lower to the ground than it would have been without. So I'm going to attach this up on the top. And same with the arm, I'm going to boom this out as far as I can go because I want to get as much distance on this as I can get. For our tripod head, I have a Sattler V20 here, and we'll go ahead and attach that on. It attaches just like it would to a set of tripod sticks. It just happens to be upside down. One note here, it is difficult to level a head while upside down. So I do recommend taking advantage of the boomed up jib while you can. Once it gets low to the ground, you won't be able to see the level really easy, and it's quite challenging to level that head out. So I'm going to attach here, and I'm going to look at our level to get this nice and leveled. There we go. And we'll orientate that properly. And then for camera, I have the Canon 5D Mark IV. I'm using this camera specifically because it has integrated built-in Wi-Fi. I thought about using the 5DSR because I wanted as much resolution with our images as I could get, but I ultimately liked the versatility of the Wi-Fi, so I'm actually going to tether this camera while it's on the end to my laptop, and my laptop's going to do all of our camera controls, and I'll actually be able to fire our shutter and everything right from my laptop. Very, very handy. If that's something you guys are interested in doing, we can potentially do a video about that on its own. It's a bit of a lengthy setup process, not difficult. You just have to connect both devices to the same network, and they're able to connect together using the EOS utility app from Canon. So I'm gonna throw a battery grip on this because I want a lot of battery life, and it makes swapping batteries much easier, because if I put a tripod plate underneath this and then mount it there, I can't access my battery door without removing my camera from the head. With the battery grip though, it actually side mounts your battery mount, so I can pull batteries and replace them without changing my frame in any way. It goes back to that consistency that I was talking about. For this particular shoot, it's very, very important to have that, so we're looking to not have to change our setup in any way. This is the battery grip here. All we have to do is remove the door underneath, which is done by just pulling a small little black switch here. I hope our close-up can make that out. You just push it to the side, and it will release right off of the bottom of your camera. And then our battery grip fits in, and there's a 1/4-20 in the center of it that I'll tighten down to secure it. And then now our batteries mount from the side so that I can pull out this and have 2 LP6 batteries mounted there for faster, quicker battery swaps and just longer battery life in general. Lastly, we are going to throw our tripod plate on here, which is just mounted with a 1/4-20 screw. And I'm using a Canon 24-70. I love this lens because it's just so versatile. I had need of this exact focal range because I knew that our frame was going to be somewhere within that, but I wasn't exactly sure which focal length I would need. And with this lens, I have all of them. So I don't have to swap lenses, which will change the weight of my jib distribution and all of that. I could keep one lens on and know that I'm good for the shoot. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop that on and throw our shade on the front of our lens. And then this just mounts onto our V20 plate and will lock in place like so. Now I can loosen our jib lock, and I can set our camera to be whatever height I want off of the ground. In this case, I'm going to set it just a few inches off the ground there, and we'll lock it in place. And now I have a straight front to back shot, just a few inches off the ground, that's easily, consistently repeatable in a miniature frame that can fit down that 39-inch leeway that we needed to fit between. And this uses a lot of virtues from each piece of gear. You get the nice long boom arm from our Kessler Pocket Jib, you get the nice compact size but sturdiness of our doorway dolly, and the versatility of the Canon 5D Mark IV mounted to the end. A really, really fun build combining a lot of different pieces of gear that I was able to do just because I've worked with them so much and I've gotten to know them and how they can be used together. So I encourage you guys, whatever gear you have or gear that you want to rent from us, experiment with it, test it out, try it out, and do test builds. They're the most important. And if you can, diagram out the builds that you're doing. I don't have any right now, but there were some really ugly sketches that I had made of all the different builds that we had, and I wanted to just make sure that theoretically and in my head everything mounted the way I wanted it to, so that when I went to do it in the real thing I didn't have any issues and didn't injure or break anything while I'm doing it. Also, a good time to note that this will probably be among our last consistent build of the day that we're doing. This series isn't going away, but we are going to become less frequent in our posting of it. Stay tuned, as we will likely still have some coming down the road. So if you guys want to see any particular builds, do still comment below. I'm still reading all of those and taking into consideration for future builds. We just have some other stuff that we want to focus on, and we're going to be diverting some of our attention over to that. But do still comment. Let's take a moment and check and see if you guys had any questions about this build today. The jib has a 20-pound weight capacity when it is fully extended and 40 pounds when it's collapsed. So we're not stressing it in that sense. It's very lightweight on the payload at the end. The only unique thing to this build is that kind of fulcrum point that I was talking about. You know, you have more force the farther you get from your fulcrum point. So this particular camera may not be very heavy, but because it's so far out from our center, it's putting a lot more force right here. So to counteract, we need to put weights, but because our weights are so close to our center, we have to put a lot more weights to be able to counteract the force coming from the end. Any other questions? All right, well, if you guys have anything that comes up, comment below. And if you've been along with us for the whole, 25 so episodes that we've had of this, thank you guys for sticking around for the journey. It's been a fun, wild ride of kind of watching this stream grow in capabilities and introducing all the new stuff to it. It's been a huge learning experience for me, and I hope you guys have learned stuff along the way as well. Check out our stream of streams if you guys are interested in getting started streaming yourselves. We did a whole live stream about how to stream and get started using our gear. So if that's something you guys are interested in and need help along the way, that's a great place to start. But if you are intimidated by all of that, the software, the cameras, I know it's a lot. Our partners over at perfectcircle.pro are here to help. They can pair you with an operator and gear so that you can focus on the creative side of the stream, what's happening on screen and all that, and they'll take care of the technical side, getting the camera set up so that you don't have to. So if that's something you guys are interested in or are looking to do streaming and don't know where to start, reach out to perfectcircle.pro and they can help you out along the way. This has been really, really fun, guys. I was really excited to show you this build. I finished building it about 3 hours before we went live, so we figured it out just beforehand. This has been Mike for a build of the day. I'll plan to see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.